ACL's gone really well. They're about minutes. And one of them has gone through that. One of them was done that. So I have an malpractice thing going on now, and she got that really done. So not crazy. It's funny because people make fun of she comes to the tennis court every day. She sits under the bench, watches 2 hours, years of fun. So we both get up and leave together. And we both win exactly the same way. People are like, you guys have the same one. I wish I'd done it.
No, you don't. Finish it to me, Jack.
Speaking of dogs, we had a first on this Osprey flight over. They loaded, first of all, we got on there, but woman, green. But they had a dog, they brought a dog on there.
Service dog?
Yeah, service dog on the Osprey. I haven't seen it yet. They picked it up and brought it right on board. Poor thing is trouble. I'm sure he's done it before.
That's right.
Traumatizing for
I went.
animals. Traumatizing enough for us. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You give a sport or you're the Masters?
I was nice, and I don't think I've nothing since.
You know, I haven't done the Masters since they did the whole. I was there. So I kind of blew that one. Maybe I'll get back.
Everybody's been heavy on the
I want to try and get back up to New York and Tennessee. That's a tough sell. So much two people on it now.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Governor of the State of New York, Kathy Hochul, Congressman Jamal Bowman from New York's 16th District, and New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Is Westchester in the house? How about students from Westchester Community College in the house? SUNY Westchester. Well, I am so delighted to be here once again with some extraordinary individuals, my partners in government, and you'll be hearing from someone that we're so proud is the President of the United States, and that is President Joe Biden. You'll be hearing from him in a couple of minutes. Our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has joined us. Congressman Jamal Bowman has joined us as well. We are also so fortunate to have the Majority Leader of the New York State Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. I believe that we also have Congressman Mike Lawler in the House. Yes, Mike Lawler. County Executive George Latimer is here. Mayor of White Plains Tom Roach is here. Mayor of Mount Vernon Sean Patterson Howard is here. Brian Sullivan, teacher at Highlands Middle School, is here. I want to thank Dr. Belinda Miles for hosting us here today. We also know that Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Chuck Schumer, is working right now with the future Speaker of the House of Representatives, and that would be our very own from Brooklyn as well, Hakeem Jeffries. They're both working with our president, working being the operative words here. You get elected, you work together to do the job, and having to encounter a lot of opposition from guess who? Republicans don't want us to work together. They don't want us to do what we're required to do, and that's called paying your bills. I'm sure a lot of you would like the chance to like run up some debt, pay for things you need, you gotta pay for your house, you gotta pay for your electric bills, you gotta pay for the diapers and tuition, all these other things. And if you could walk away from paying your bills after just having a couple of fights, it'd probably be interesting, wouldn't it? But we don't do that. We're responsible. We do what we're supposed to do. And so, you come to New York. New York is the beating heart of the U.S. economy. So you mess around with the debt ceiling, you're hurting New York. You're hitting us hard. And not just the state in general, but let's think about who. How about the students right here at SUNY Westchester who will have their financial assistance unavailable to them? It'll put us closer to a recession, cause unemployment to go up. It'll be devastating. It also shakes the confidence of the rest of the world in the United States of America. And we don't need that at this time. We need friends. We don't want people to question our ability to govern. And brinkmanship is their attempt, Republicans' attempt to just bring it right to the edge, make everybody all anxious, affect the stock market, because they don't care. They don't care. They're just going to play out their political games. But I've got a message for them. It doesn't work. In 2011, I was elected as a Democrat in the most Republican district in the state of New York. Clearly, there are a lot more Republicans than Democrats in that district. How did I do that? I talked about issues that people cared about regardless of their party, because here's the message to Republicans. When you think you have a great political strategy, I'm telling you how it's going to backfire. There actually are Republican seniors who don't want you to mess with Medicare and Social Security. There's Republican veterans who don't want you to affect their benefits. There are Republican students who don't want you to mess with their student loans. There's Republican business people in particular who aren't real excited about you playing around with this. So the message is, you might think it's a political strategy. I'm here to tell you it is going to backfire. Because the people of this nation, people of this state, Democrats and Republicans, want you to go and do the job you're elected to do. And that's exactly what President Biden wants to do. Let's get this done. What's the big deal? This is what we're supposed to do. And so this is an attempt to focus attention, say you have to do what we want you to do, but it is going to fail. It is going to be a cataclysmic failure, because if the longer this plays out, the more uncertainty, the more volatility, the more anxiety, not just in the markets, not just around the world, but in people's houses, at their kitchen table. Because they need to know that they have the confidence that their government is actually going to work together. So that's what we're just saying. That's what President Biden's saying. Come on, let's roll up our sleeves. We can get this done. It's not complicated. And there's no reason to play these games at this time. So here we go. My message is, stop playing games with the American people. Stop playing games with the American economy. Stop playing games with our farmers. Stop playing games with our citizens. Stop playing games with our small businesses. And just do your jobs. Thank you, President Biden, for being our leader. Thank you very much.
What's up, Westchester County in the building? How y'all doing? It's so great to be here. Such an honor to be here with my colleagues pushing this very important common sense issue. Before I get into my remarks, I need to know who's in the house and who can make the most noise in this auditorium. Let's start. Who's in the house? To my right, make some noise. To the center, make some. To the left, make some noise. To the center, make some noise. Oh no, I think the right got it. Listen. That's what I'm talking about. Listen. Unfortunately, in Congress, we have a Republican Party that continues to govern through fear-mongering, continues to govern through misinformation and disinformation. They continue to govern through chaos. And in governing that way, you create a chaotic economy and a chaotic country. And that is not what we need at this moment. We are just coming out of a global pandemic that we are struggling with still. We just came away from an insurrection nurtured and facilitated by the big lie that was pushed by the Republican Party. And now in Congress, we see the same tactics in their governing. There's no way in hell we are going to default on our responsibility to pay our debt. Because if we do, it will destroy the global economy. So they are literally trying to hold the global economy hostage while they feign as if they are fiscally responsible. They are not. We raised the debt limit 3 times under President Trump. And every time you have a Republican president, we leave in more debt than when you have a Democratic president. These are facts. Let me also say this. As we all know, our most precious resource are our children. Our most precious resource are our young people. So, in their negotiations with President Biden, they're literally trying to cut resources to our children, to our teachers, to our counselors, to an education system that is already dealing with a lack of resources and a mental health crisis amongst our children. Not only that, when my brother Mondaire Jones was with me in Congress, and we made the child tax credit a reality, Republicans cut the child tax credit, which put 50% of children back into poverty. So they're okay with 1 in 5 children going to bed hungry. They're okay with our children not having sports, the arts, and the mental health resources they need in our schools. And they're okay with our children dying every day from gun violence because they won't do a damn thing about it. We need a ban on assault rifles. We need universal background checks. We need universal red flag laws. We need universal safe storage. We need to close the gun show loopholes. And we need to deal with the issue of gun trafficking that's killing black and brown babies every day. Republicans don't give a damn about our children. And if you don't care about our children, you don't care about our country. So in 2024, let's vote them out of office and vote the right people into office to respond to the issues we all care about. Thank you so much.
Jamal Bowman's in the house. Well, this shows how much the people of Westchester want to get something done. And we are so grateful that our president is here right now to stand up for our veterans, to stand up for our students, to stand up for our children, and to stand up for our families. And thank you. But to be honest, none of us really want to be here. But Speaker McCarthy has different plans for this country. Speaker McCarthy wants to put the full faith and credit of the United States at risk. Never before in our nation's history have we had a speaker who did not put the families of America first. Never before have we had a speaker who's unwilling to do the right thing in the face of grave danger and threat to our country. Our governor, our congressman said it right. Who's being put at risk here? Everything that we did over the last 2 years to help families recover from COVID is going to be thrown out the window. All those veterans who we now exposed to burn pits, throw them out the window. All the resources that we put to end gun violence, to stop gun trafficking, and have mental health for violence disruption, out the window. I see the moms are here. Thank you, moms, for being here. We know what will happen if the full faith and credit of the American public and our ability to pay our debts is put at risk. In America, we pay our debts. We pay our bills. Every family in Westchester County, every family in New York State, they pay their bills because that's what we do. But not Speaker McCarthy. He doesn't want to pay his bills. He doesn't want to pay the bills from the last presidential administration that President Trump rang up. He doesn't want to pay the bills that keep the lights on in our economy. If McCarthy has his way, do you know what's going to happen? Well, the stock market will crash, and every person who's here, are there any teachers in the house? Are there any teachers in the house? Are there any union members in the house? Our union members, our teachers, our hardworking Yorkers, your retirement accounts will go down the drain. That is what is going to happen if we do not make good on our debts. He's putting the full faith and credit of the entire American economy at risk. Here's some dollars for you, because this is where it really hits home. It would mean $4.9 billion less coming into our state of New York. Do you know what we did in the last Congress? President Biden passed the biggest, most significant infrastructure bill in the history of America. That bill is paying for all of the investments we've been wanting to make for a long time that Governor Hochul will help make sure are right. Whether it's new roads and new bridges or new sewer systems, whether it's better mass transit or investing in our airports, whether it's investing in our ports or investing in our electric grid. These are the investments that New York needs. All of them are at risk. This will also threaten care for 200,000 veterans. Our veterans who put their lives on the line for this country, for our democracy, they deserve the health care that they have earned when they come home. That will be unfunded. Not paying our debts will take out our Social Security and our Medicare. It will undermine the investments that we need to make in our older Americans and our seniors. It will jeopardize the food assistance that is helping families that still haven't recovered from COVID, whether it's for kids or veterans or seniors or active duty service members. All of those food assistance dollars will be lost. And it will make college more expensive to every student in this room. How many students do we have here today? How many teachers do we have here today? Speaker McCarthy, pay the debts. Make sure that our first faith and credit is good.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Brian Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan teaches 7th grade science at Highlands Middle School in White Plains, New York.
My name is Brian Sullivan, and I am a proud 7th grade science teacher and member of the New York State United Teachers. I'm joined today by my wife Amy, my 4 children, Brendan, Eleanor, Shay, and Layla, my mother and father, Nancy and Tom. Over 20 years ago, I came home to this community in Valhalla, where I was welcomed by former teachers and coaches and began working with young athletes. There, I discovered my passion for engaging with children. I enrolled here at Westchester Community College to begin accruing the credits necessary to become a science teacher. I could not have chosen a more fulfilling career, the entirety of which I have spent in the wonderfully diverse community of White Plains. In White Plains, the children have always been my why. They are why I love my work, and I am inspired by them daily. I am humbled to be here representing the thousands of educators who provide knowledge, joy, comfort, safety, and stability to so many children. That's why I'm concerned about harmful cuts in the recent House bill. Cuts that would result in teachers losing their jobs and more students in every classroom. These cuts would make it harder for me and my colleagues to educate our students. Forcing these harmful cuts through the threat of default won't help us train our future leaders. Luckily, we have a president who is fighting for us, for teachers, for students. He knows our students are the future of our country, and being married to a fellow educator, he knows that better than most. It is my privilege to introduce to you our President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
What position did he play? It looks like he spends a lot of time in the gym. Please sit down, sit down, sit down. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. Governor Hochul, thank you for welcoming us to your state. And she's helping New York lead the way making things in America. And I mean making things in America, not importing them, making them, sending products out, bringing jobs back. And my friend, the Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, can't be here today. I don't know what he's doing. He's just down there trying to settle a crisis. He's the best there is, man. And I want to thank him for working so hard for the people of the state and for being such a great partner. Nobody's been a greater fight for women's rights in the Congress than Senator Kristen Gillibrand. God love her. I've been backing everything she's wanted to do for a long time. I tell you what, when she comes in and asks for something, it's easy to just say yes. Don't even start discussing it because you're just going to give in anyway. She's taken on the military and she's a game changer. And it's great to see Representative Jamal Bowman, lifelong educator, champion of the next generation. And Republican Congressman Mike Lawler's here as well. Mike's on the other team, but you know what? Mike is the kind of guy that when I was in the Congress, they were the kind of Republican I was used to dealing with. But he's not one of these MAGA Republicans, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. I don't want to get him in trouble by saying anything nice about him or negative about him, but thanks for coming, Mike. Thanks for being here. This is the way we used to do it all the time. And I want to acknowledge all the state and local officials as well. The President, Belinda Miles, thanks for hosting us, and Madam President, my wife teaches full-time at a community college in Northern Virginia, and she's been teaching for a long time. She says two things. One, the community college is the best-kept secret in America. Well, they are. And two, equally as important, any state that out-educates us, any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. It's a simple proposition. This is a really important moment. There's a big debate going on in this country about protecting America's hard-earned reputation as the most trusted, reliable nation in the world, and about how we fix the long-term fiscal health of this nation. The debate is with enormous implications for the American economy. and quite frankly, for the world economy. And that's not hyperbole, for the world economy. It's important for the American people to know what's at stake. This isn't just a theoretical debate going on in Washington. The decisions we make are going to have real impact on real people's lives. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So let me tell you a story about what's going on. There's a very extreme wing of the Republican Party, and the House of Representatives refer to themselves now. I've been calling them this for a while, but now they refer to themselves as the MAGA Republicans. And they've taken control of the House. They've taken control. They have a speaker who has his job because he yielded to the, quote, MAGA element of the party. They're doing the best, to the best of my knowledge, what no other political party has done in the nation's history. They're literally, not figuratively, holding the economy hostage by threatening to default on our nation's debt that we've already incurred over the last couple hundred years, unless we give in to their threats and demands as to what they think we should be doing with regard to the budget. This would be incredibly damaging. Here's what the Speaker has put forward for the Republican proposal. He says he's going to take the funding, how we fund government, back to what the levels were in 2022, before the omnibus bill. And they exclude any cuts in defense. He said we're going to go back to spending what we spent in 2022, but we're not going to make any cuts in defense, which we spent in 2023. We're calling for in 2023. You may remember in the State of the Union, I got our Republican colleagues to agree somewhat spontaneously to protect Social Security and Medicare from any cuts. Remember I said, now let me get this straight. You're not going to cut Medicare? You're not going to? They said, that's right. I said, well, you know, you're on camera. They can see you. Well, so far, they're not cutting Social Security so far. And not only do they rule out any new revenue, they're still determined to make permanent the $2 trillion tax cuts which due to expire, the Trump tax cuts, without paying a penny of it. Now, here's what that leaves us with. It's just basic sort of math. It leaves us with the requirement to cut 22% of everything else in the budget in order to meet the requirements they're demanding that we live at the 2022 budget numbers. The Speaker and the Republicans don't like that I point that out. But that's not my opinion. It's just basic math. And here's what it does. It makes huge cuts in important programs for millions of working and middle-class Americans, programs they count on. According to estimates, the Republican bill would put 21 million people at risk of losing Medicaid, including 2.3 million people here in New York State and 78,000 people right here in Westchester County. It's devastating. It's not right. The Republican plan would cut federal law enforcement officers, 30,000, including 11,000 FBI agents, 2,000 border agents, DEA agents, and so on. They've cut. That's what it's, in order to meet the requirements, they'd have to cut that many law enforcement officers. It risks shutting down 375 air traffic control towers, including 5 right here in New York State, like Westchester County Airport, because we don't have enough personnel. And I've long believed that we have many obligations as a nation, but I've heard me say this before, I apologize for repeating it, but we only have one truly sacred obligation. We have many obligations, one sacred obligation. And that's to equip those we send to war and take care of them and their families when they come home. It's a sacred obligation. For real. And that's why one of the reasons I fought so hard and I was so proud to sign the Bipartisan PACT Act that takes care of millions of veterans who are exposed to toxic materials, that take care of their families as well. My son went to Iraq for a year, was one of the healthiest guys in his outfit, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma, having lived just less than a quarter mile from one of those major burn pits. You saw what happened in the trade towers that went down, what happened to all those firemen, and exposure to toxic chemicals. But under the Republican bill today, they would cut 30 million veterans' health care visits. The way they do that, that's including nearly 2 million health care visits for veterans in New York State, because there's not enough personnel. There's not enough personnel. The difference between the 2022 budget which they want to get back to, and the 2023 budget is I increased the funding for the Veterans Administration by $22 billion. And the reason I did it, and probably some of you know of these folks, the number of, more veterans are committing suicide than are being killed in battle. And so they pick up the phone, they call the VA in their area. I need help. We'll come in 6 weeks. Come in and whatever. Well, we ended that. Now they want to go back to the levels where we cut those folks that now provide that kind of help. This amounts to a $22 billion cut in veterans' health care. Now they dispute this. They, nowhere in their actual proposal are there exclusive protection for veterans. But they say it's unusual language we use with presidents these days. They say I'm lying when I say that. Well, the truth is, why do so many veterans groups, why have they spoken out in opposition to the Republican proposal? They're not all Democrats. They know what's going to happen. Folks, that's a game Republicans are playing. Anytime you single out the impact of their overall cuts, they tell you, no, it's not true. But they're wrong. They want to protect something. They would have written it down and say, we're protecting it. You can't cut this program. You can't cut it. So you can see it. Here's another example. Under the Republican plan, nationwide, 100,000 teachers and support staff would lose their jobs at the very time we're attempting to overcome the incredible deficiencies that occurred as a consequence of what happened with the pandemic. So many kids, the average student out there is about 1.5 years behind. We don't need fewer teachers, we need more teachers. And by the way, I'm not being solicitous. What we should be doing, and I'm proposing when I try to finish this job, and proposing that we, for example, if we start, instead of Head Start, which they want to cut 21,000 Head Start spots in this state alone, we should be sending, all the studies show that if we send, no matter what the background of a child, if we sent that child to a school at age 3, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, age 3 and 4 and 5, we end up increasing by 56% the chance they'll graduate from high school and go on beyond high school. But look, we're here at a community college. And by the way, this is one beautiful community college. No, it really is. The property here is made. And the consequences here would be severe. Here in New York, it would cut the maximum Pell Grant that millions of students use to get to community college by nearly $1,000. It would eliminate Pell Grants entirely for 5,000 New York students. And here at another devastating consequence they don't want you to know about. Moody's, not a Democratic outfit, a respected Wall Street analytical firm, said the Republican plan would cost the country 780,000 jobs. Yesterday, I brought the congressional leaders together at the White House to make sure America doesn't default on its debt, and for the first time in our history. And by the way, I know the speaker keeps saying, 93 days ago I said to Biden, I want to talk to him. And I said, fine. I said, you put down your budget, I'll put down mine. I laid mine down in detail on the 9th of March. He didn't put down his so-called budget. I don't know what you'd call it. His connecting the two items. He didn't do that until 5 days after he did it. I invited him to the White House. So folks, look, let's be clear. The debt we're talking about is accumulated over 200 years. The last administration alone, the last guy who served in this office for 4 years, increased the total national debt by 40% in just 4 years. Over the last decade, the single largest contribution to the debt, aside from the pandemic, were the Trump tax cuts skewed to the wealthy and large corporations for $2 trillion. It made it clear, I made it clear, America is not a deadbeat nation. We pay our bills. And I was pleased but not surprised by the Republican leader in the United States Senate, McConnell, who said after the meeting in the White House, and he went to the press, he said, the United States is not going to default. It never has, and it never will. We shouldn't even be talking about it. And folks, Republicans in Congress used to understand this. In fact, under the previous president, Republicans voted to avoid default 3 times. This is not your father's Republican Party, though. You know, here's what's happened if MAGA Republicans get their way. American defaults on our debt, higher interest rates for credit cards, car loans, mortgages, payments for Social Security, Medicare, our troops, veterans could all be halted or delayed. According again to Moody's, 8 million Americans would lose their jobs, including 400,000 New Yorkers alone. Our economy would fall into recession, and our international reputation would be damaged in the extreme. We shouldn't even be having this situation, talking about this situation. As you know, I do an awful lot of foreign policy with my stint as a senator for all those years and then as vice president. And I've traveled the world. I've met with over 88 heads of state so far. They all are looking at me. Are you guys serious? No, I'm serious. Because if we default on our debt, the whole world is in trouble. This is a manufactured crisis. There's no question about America's ability to pay its bills. America has the strongest economy in the world, and we should be cutting spending and lowering the deficit without a needless crisis in a responsible way. I believe in cutting spending and cutting the deficit. In my first 2 years in office, I'm the only president in history that's lowered the deficit in those 2 years by a record $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion. And the budget I proposed back in March would cut the deficit again by nearly $3 trillion in the decade ahead. For example, my budget cuts $30 billion in wasteful spending on tax subsidies to the gas and oil companies. They earned tax subsidies aren't all bad, but they earned $200 billion last year. Do they need a $30 billion subsidy? Well, look, it cuts wasteful spending for Big Pharma. We pay more for our prescription drugs than any nation in the world, any advanced nation in the world. You can get the exact same drug if you fly to Paris or London or to Germany, anywhere you've traveled, Canada, and then you pay here, you pay a lot more. On Big Pharma, we cut that spend by $200 billion by expanding the Medicare's power to negotiate prescription drug prices and making drug companies pay rebates when they raise prices faster than inflation. And we've already cut by $160 billion in savings the bill we passed last year, and it has 3 parts to it, by the way. One part didn't kick in until January 1. We said the price of insulin and other drugs, the price of insulin would be reduced to $35. How many of you know someone with type 1 or type 2 diabetes? And you know, it's needed to keep, they need insulin to keep themselves alive or their children alive or in good health. Well, guess what? The price of insulin went from $400, $500, $600 a month down to $35 a month. For those on Medicare. And here's the deal. It's not just that it made it reasonable for people to be able to stay healthy, but it saved the government $160 billion because they're paying less out. And by the way, the other cuts that are coming up because of what we did with regard to being able to negotiate with Medicare, it's estimated we're going to save another $200 billion. For example, any of you know someone who's on Medicare and also on a cancer drug? Well, guess what? They're paying right now sometimes $12,000, $14,000, $16,000 a year for the cancer drug. Well, beginning this next January, the most any senior is going to have to pay is $3,500 for all of their drugs. And beginning in 2025, they've paid no more than $2,000 for all their drugs. Well, by the way, That saves the government another $200 billion because you're not paying out for all the drugs come forward and they come at a reasonable price. My budget also cuts tax loopholes. Look, I don't have anything against Wall Street or hedge funds executive, but just pay your taxes, man. No, I'm serious. Hedge funds executives pay a lower tax rate than the middle-class worker who works for them. No one earning less than $400,000 is going to see a single penny in increase in their taxes under me. Not a single penny. They haven't yet, and they won't. If you're making more than 400, well, start to pay your fair share. Look, instead, we're making the biggest corporations begin to pay their fair share. I'm not talking about 70% tax rates. For example, at least pay something. Folks, let me ask you this. Does anyone think we have a fair tax system in America? No, I'm being deadly earnest. I'm not being a wise guy. In 2020, you got tired of hearing me say this. I pointed out there were 50 major corporations of the 55 of the Fortune 500 companies that paid zero in federal income tax after having made $40 billion in profits. $40 billion. So we instituted and got passed a corporate minimum tax of 15%. Well, guess what? Y'all are paying more than that. Just 15%. And it paid for everything we did. Look, I proposed a billionaire minimum tax. There now went from about 760, I think the number was, to around 1,000 billionaires in America. Well, that's great. If you want to be a billionaire, you can make it. I'm not one of these guys that say you shouldn't be able to do that. And if you're a multimillionaire, I'm not trying to say that can't happen. But at least pay something. The average tax paid by the 1,000 billionaires in America, individually, the average tax paid is 8%, E-I-G-H-T, 8%. No billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or a firefighter. There's nothing radical about this. That's why my budget also fully funds the Internal Revenue Service. You know, and it's kind of interesting. Republicans have been consistent for the last 10 years, cutting the number of IRS agents. I wonder why. So we now have legislation that passed that's in our budget that says we're going to beef up the number of IRS agents to thoroughly look at the taxes of billionaires in America. According to the Congressional Budget Office, a bipartisan office, they estimate that just that alone would raise another $200 billion a year. Larry Summers, who's not what you call a wacko liberal out there, right? Former president of Harvard, he says it's more like... My kids who went to Penn would disagree, but that's okay. But I went to a great school. I went to a state school. I went to the University of Delaware. But anyway, but all kidding aside, estimates that it would raise another $400 billion a year. And they still wouldn't be paying very much tax relative to their income to begin with. My budget also has some of the strongest anti-fraud proposals ever. You may remember when we had the legislation to help deal with the pandemic, what Trump used to keep doing is cutting the number of inspectors general to be able to find out whether or not this money is actually not being wasted. Well, guess what? Turns out there were several billions of dollars that were being wasted. People were getting money they didn't need or didn't deserve, and they were playing the system. Well, you know, I think that we should have inspectors general again, looking at what, in fact, we're spending and whether it's going where it's supposed to go. It calls for an unprecedented effort to combat identity fraud by tripling anti-fraud strike forces to prosecute pandemic fraudsters and seize back stolen funds. There's billions of dollars in stolen funds that we haven't gotten back yet. It strengthens inspector generals and watchdogs for taxpayers' dollars. It's estimated for every $1 we spend in hiring these folks, it's going to save $10. $10. This debate is about fundamental choices. Would you rather continue a subsidy of $30 billion for big oil or cut $30 billion from veterans? Would you rather cut big pharma or cut health care for Americans? These are real world choices. That's what's at stake, literally. You know, I ran for president to see to it that ordinary folks got an even shake. I was raised in a family that was a typical, we weren't poor, typical middle-class family. My dad, we lived in a 3-bedroom split-level home in a housing development that it was a nice area. That was when they were developing suburbia with 4 kids and a grandpa living with us. I look back on it and wonder how thin those walls were for my mom and dad, but at any rate. But, you know, the truth of the matter is that, you know, my dad did fine. I guess by the time he retired, he managed an automobile dealership. He was probably making the equivalent of $20,000 a year, which would be like, what, 60 or 70 or 80, I don't know what it would be. But my point is that I've always thought the middle-class folks are getting the short end of things. I think the trickle-down economy, not much ever trickled down on my dad's table that I can recall. And so when I ran, and my whole career as a senator was about making sure middle-class folks get an even shot. That's why I believe we should grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. The wealthy will still do very well. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. And that's fine. We all do well. We've made enormous progress. Just look at what we've done so far. Over the past 2 years, we've created a record 12.7 million new jobs, more than ever in that period of time, including 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Unemployment is at 3.4%, the lowest in 50 years. Black unemployment is at one of its lowest levels. Hispanic unemployment across the board. In part, our policies and the pace of our annual inflation has been coming down for 10 months in a row. We still slowed by 45%. We still have more to do. But, you know, when we're in a position to invest in America, in all of America, the way we do that is we buy American products, we hire American workers. I get to spend a lot of money that Congress passes. So if I have $60 billion to spend, and I'm going to have to put new decks on aircraft carriers, I don't outsource the work. There was a law back in the 30s that said, buy American, buy American. So they have to use American products. They have to go out and make sure that they hire American workers. For a long time, in Democrat and Republican administrations, it was cheaper to go get the cheap labor overseas and bring back the expensive product. No more. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. Instead of importing jobs abroad for cheaper labor and importing product, we're exporting product and buying American workers the opportunity to make a living. Folks, I signed the American Rescue Plan, which sent $27 million to this community college to keep students enrolled and keep this school afloat, help vaccinate our nation, got immediate relief for folks who needed it the most, and got our economy back in track. It didn't have a single solitary Republican vote. Then I signed the bipartisan infrastructure law, which had some Republicans voting for it, to build the roads, the best roads, bridges, airports, water systems, high-speed internet, get rid of all those pipes that are polluting water, et cetera. You know, how can we be the most prosperous economy in the world without having the greatest infrastructure in the world? We used to be ranked #1 in the world in infrastructure. You know what we rank now? 13. 13. Next week, this is Infrastructure Week. Remember all for 4 years in Alaska, we had Infrastructure Week every week? Well, under my predecessor, Infrastructure Week became a punchline. On my watch, we're making infrastructure a decade, a headline. We're already announced over 25,000 projects in 4,500 towns across America. Across Westchester County, it's projects for better water, wastewater, and sewer systems, repairing dams, and doing so much more. I signed the CHIPS and Science Act, which I felt very strongly about, to bring back key parts of our supply chain back to America. Remember when we had real trouble when automobiles, Detroit said they had to stop making automobiles? You know, they take 3,000 chips. Well, guess what? They were all being made in Asia. And when the pandemic hit, they shut down. So we were in trouble. Folks, these are the small computer chips the size of the end of your little finger. Nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones, automobiles, refrigerators, most sophisticated weapon systems. America invented these chips. We invented them. We made them better. But over time, we went from producing up to 40% of the world's chips to producing only 10%, despite leading the world in research and design. Now we're turning that around. The private sector, I went around the world and at home and I convinced people that they had to invest in building the chip factories here. They call them fabs, F-A-B-S, factories. Investing, guess what? We've got a commitment for investments of $470 billion by American companies home and abroad for manufacturing clean energy, like Micron in Syracuse investing $100 billion over the next 20 years to build semiconductors thanks to the hard work of Chuck Schumer and Governor Hochul. IBM and Poughkeepsie investing $20 billion over the next computer chip. Putting America back in the game and creating thousands of good-paying jobs. Many of these jobs, first of all, the construction takes a lot of jobs. They don't require 4 years degrees when you're in these fabs. You know what the average pay is going to be? Close to $100,000. You don't need a college degree. That's progress. But I know folks are still struggling with inflation. The way I think about it is the way my dad used to talk about it around the kitchen table for real. He'd say, how much are the monthly bills? At the end of the month, you have enough to pay for all your bills and just have a little breathing room left, just a little breathing room. Well, that's why I wrote and signed the Inflation Reduction Act. Americans pay more in prescription drugs, I said, than any advanced country on earth. We're fighting for years to allow Medicare to negotiate those lower drug prices. Well, we finally beat Big Pharma, and we did it without a single Republican vote. It'll have a profound impact and save lives. It's already happening. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to reduce the deficit by $160 billion just this year. And how many of, like I said, diabetes, 1 in 10 Americans have diabetes. Millions need insulin to stay alive. Insulin has been around for 100 years. Costs $10 to make it, $10. Package it, a total of $12. And they're paying hundreds of dollars, making record profits. Well, we capped it at $35, as I said. And we're going to make sure it's capped at $35 for everyone, not just those on Social Security. Because guess what? It saves the taxpayer money. The federal government doesn't have to write a check for $400. It writes a check for $35. Look, Inflation Reduction Act also makes the biggest investment in fighting climate change anywhere in the history of the world. And it's creating tens of thousands of jobs. It's a giant step towards saving the planet. Tax credit for consumers who weatherize their homes. Many of you have done it. Purchasing energy-efficient windows, doors, appliances, electric vehicles can save an average of $1,000 a year. Look, tax credits for states and businesses to deploy renewable energy, solar, wind, hydrogen, and more. Not a single Republican voted for it, this law. And now they want to get rid of it all. Why would they want to repeal a law that's creating American jobs and lowering costs for American families? Well, when we ever heard of a Republican opposing tax credits for businesses? Well, that's what they're doing this time. Take a look at the New York Times yesterday, what they wrote. I think it was the front page. Texas now is becoming one of the leading states in the nation in renewable energy. The number of wind farms they have, solar farms, and hydrogen. But now the Republicans want to get rid of this law and these tax credits. Well, why do you think that is? Because the fossil fuel industry wants to get rid of them. That's why. Even though they're creating jobs, taking on climate change, they don't want it because it's so much more costly to go the other route. They say it costs too much, but the truth is it's too successful. And here's the real truth. Big oil doesn't want it, and the Republicans are carrying their water. That's what this is all about. Let me close with this. We made so much progress, but there's so much more to do. We're on the cusp of a major change. We're creating jobs again. American manufacturers are booming again. Where's it written America can't lead the world in manufacturing? We're lowering the deficit. Towns that had been forgotten and left behind are coming alive again, bringing back a sense of pride. All those chip factories, fabs I talked about, they're going to be all over America. They're not just going to be in the Northeast and the West Coast. They're all through the Central America. You know people who come from the people like, for example, up in Scranton where I came from, where I was born and raised, or other states across the country, where all of a sudden the factory that employed 700 people for years shut down and went abroad. Not only did they lose the jobs, they lost their sense of pride. They lost their sense of belonging. How many folks do you know folks in the Midwest who had their kids come up and say, Mom, Dad, I got a good education, but I got to leave. There's no jobs here. No reason to stay. We're bringing jobs back all across America. This is no time to put all this at risk, to threaten a recession, to put at risk millions of jobs, to undermine America's standing in the world. Republican threats are dangerous and they make no sense. Folks, we have to keep going and finish the job. I've long said it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. And I can honestly say, as I stand here today, I've never been more optimistic about America's future than I am this very day. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. We're the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We got to fight. We're going to win this fight. Thank you.
Just the silver connector. You're number 11. I remember. Yeah.